get to the limits of monetary policy, well, actually, no, let me ask you another question. Are we at the limits of monetary policy? You've already completely and utterly dismissed fiscal action, and obviously we know it can't happen with a divided house in the States necessarily. Will the monetary actions globally have enough firepower to avert a potential falling stock market this time round?
Enough firepower? Well, obviously, if you go down the route of the Bank of Japan and start buying equities, things like that, it could do a certain level of cushioning of those blows. Absolutely, it could. I think that obviously it's not that we've reached the limits in the stock markets, but it is true that obviously the diminishing returns are pretty evident. For example, we have just seen how the European Central Bank has started its repurchase program again, yet spreads are gradually creeping up in some Eurozone countries. So what monetary policy from here does is to put a lid, is to put a cap on the risk, but not much more. It's what I think that it does. There can be a lot of things that central banks can do on top of what they're already doing, but the question is, will it work in terms of macro, in terms of inflation?
It will work if the primary action which you mentioned to me there is buying stocks. If they buy more stocks than people are selling, then it will work. So you're saying that the central bank manipulation of asset classes will avert any asset fall crisis?
At least a massive asset fall, yeah, at least one like that, or a prolonged one. If you think of, actually, look at what happened between October and December of last year. Synchronized asset price fall all over the markets. Central banks immediately react. But let's think of how they reacted. They didn't do a lot. The central bank balance sheet, both of the Fed, the BOJ and the ECB, didn't change dramatically. What they did was basically just say to markets that the process of normalization was over. And that changed the perception of risk from most market participants very, very quickly. I know it's dangerous, but it is ultimately when the problem is that central banks have gone from being the lenders of last resorts to the enablers of asset price inflation. So if asset price inflation stops, it generates a domino effect that creeps into the real economy. And that is the sort of catch-22 problem in which central banks have put themselves into, their problem. But the reality is that they will react with more aggressive movements in terms of maybe buying equities, buying corporate bonds, buying the most aggressive side of the spectrum in assets. We'll see.
Okay. Dan, thank you very much for that. Now